You're more forceful about it. You got everybody. We got it.
Ready?
Hello. Sorry. We've got to quiet down now. If you're still getting coffee or gonna get something, that's fine. Just do it quietly. I'm Linda Urban Soy, and I'm just gonna do a brief introduction. Ursula and her husband Jim joined Worthington Presbyterian Church in February of 2022. In 2021, they moved from Virginia, Southern Virginia, Southwestern Virginia, and came to Worthington. And Ursula was a teacher for many years in many different places, because Jim had three kind of separate careers, one in the Navy, one as an engineer, and then as a lawyer. And they moved multiple times over the years. She got her teaching degree at multiple different learning institutions. And she's taught in many places too. Currently, since they moved here in 2021, she's been active in area schools as a volunteer, active in arts and crafts activities throughout the community. Pickleball has become a favorite activity. And here at Worthington Presbyterian, she's been a mainstay of our choir, as has Jim. And
placeholder, we call it.
she's part of one of the Presbyterian Women's United circles, the Circle of Grace, as well as attends board meetings. And she's on the board of the Worthington Presbyterian Preschool. And then she volunteers in many of the other activities the church is involved in. And she's originally from Germany and would like to share a bit of her story regarding that time.
You know, I'm a little embarrassed because at least you didn't pay for this. I did not, I signed up to do this with a group of women. I mean, maybe I thought there might be 9 or 10. And all of a sudden it's turned into, I don't think CNN's here yet. But I hope that you get something out of it, and I hope it's fun, and I hope it goes quickly and that it isn't terrible. So, weißt ihr, wie viel Sternlein stehen auf dem blauen Himmelszelt? Weißt ihr, wie viel Wolken gehen weit hinüber alle Welt? Gott der Herr hat sie gezählet, dass ihm auch kein eines fehlet, an der ganzen großen Zahl, an der ganzen großen Zahl. Do you know how many stars there are in the sky? In the blue sky? Do you know how many clouds there are that go around the world all the time? God in heaven counts them all so that he doesn't lose a one. Weißt ihr, wie viel Mücklein spielen in den klaren Sonnenglut? Weißt ihr, wie viel Fisch sich kühlen in der ganzen Wassersflut? Gott der Herr rief sie bei Namen, dass sie all ins Leben kamen, dass sie nun so fröhlich sind, dass sie nun so fröhlich sind. Do you know how many mosquitoes play in the sunshine every day? Do you know how many fish cool themselves in the clear water? God in heaven counted, gave them all a name so that they would have life. And this is the last one. Bear with me. Weißt ihr, wie viel Kindlein früher stehen aus ihrem Bettchen auf, dass sie ohne Sorg und Mühe fröhlich sind im Tageslauf? Gott, der Herr hat an allen seinen Lust und Wohlgefallen, kennt auch dich und hat dich lieb, kennt auch dich und hat dich lieb. Do you know how many children get up every morning happily to have the rest of their day? God knows every one of them and knows what they do that they love and that they like, and he knows you too and loves you too. There is. I'm gonna need help, Nick.
God knows Nick's name too.
Thought it was pressing these buttons. Yeah, so what happened? So is it working now?
Yes.
Okay. I need to start a little bit with my father and tell you how this whole thing started. And this is a picture of him in 1900, which is the year that he was born. The next picture is a picture of my grandparents with their children. My mother, oh, somebody gave me this fancy. My mother is right here. And these are two sisters of hers, and that's why I got my name. I am Ursula Hildegard Käthe. One of the aunts is named Hildegard, and the other one's named Käthe. And so I have all three names. This is a picture of my mother and father when they were in Friedrichshafen. Friedrichshafen is the place where they started to build the Graf Zeppelin. My father was in the First World War, and he was a signal corpsman. Jim, did that mean that he flew a flag? No, in the First World War. Okay, he didn't hear me. Anyway, and so one of the characteristics that that they said they could always tell my father when he came towards them was that he was bow-legged from riding this horse all the time. This is a map of, not a big map, but a map of Germany, and it tells you a little bit about where Berlin is, where I was born, and up at the top, I don't know, it's not very good right now. Friedrichshafen is where my mother and the father were. The reason my mother came to Friedrichshafen is because she was a bookkeeper, and her mother said, I don't know exactly how old she was maybe 23. Her mother said, I don't know if you know anything about housekeeping. You're just taking me books. So I'm going to send you to your sister who lives in Friedrichshafen, and she has 3 young children, and you will learn how to take care of the house and the children. And it turns out that that's where my father was working, and that's how they met. And that is a picture before they were married. They were married in 1926, and my father worked on the Graf Zeppelin. And this is a picture of that. It was a big balloon, and I've been reading about the trips that the Graf Zeppelin made, and it is amazing. Supposedly, when they came to New York, there were thousands of people that came to watch the ship land. When they went to Chicago, I mean, there were just crowds everywhere. And people decided they could, go back and forth across the ocean in the dirigible. And if you had a lot of money, that is, I think it was quite expensive. But the Graf Zeppelin had, for example, a piano, okay, a wardroom that had a big place where people could eat and sit and talk. And they also had a place where people slept, of course, and, it was like a big cabin. So it was a fun time, they say. This is a letter that the bearer of this letter, Mr. Paul Kinley, is one of the most valued employees, having had a number of years. I don't know if you can read it. Can you read it?
No.
having had it. Turn it on. Is it on? Having had a number of years of actual experience as a member of the crew of the various German airships, Mr. Kindling joined our organization in September 1930, and we know him to be an honest, conscientious worker of high intelligence and good moral character. During the year 1924, 12 German airship engineers joined the staff of the Goodyear Zeppelin Corporation, and it is interesting to note that these men have all either become citizens of the United States or have declared their intentions of doing so, are respected residents of the community, most of them being homeowners. We unhesitatingly class Mr. Kindling as an individual of this type. Mr. Kindling, who is in this country as a visitor with special permission, will return to Germany unless he is able to have his family join him in this country. And losing his services will be a decided liability to this organization. Any assistance given Mr. Kindling in this matter will be highly appreciated. Well, that's how my father went back from America to Germany and picked up my mother and their 2 children. They came to America in 31, and they lived in Fairlawn up in Cleveland, and he worked at Goodyear Aircraft. And they stayed until 1935. So they spoke German, they spoke English, they spoke German, they went to work and lived here. There are pictures of them having a car. There are pictures of one time, I think they rode a horse. 1935, there were issues with more Zeppelins being built, and the Navy wasn't buying any more airships. And so they said to the Germans that were here, we will pay your passage back, or you can take a wage cut and stay. And of course, my parents had brother and sisters and mother and father. My father's parents were not living anymore, but my mother's were. And so they said, well, we're going to go back to Germany. So in 1935, may not have been the best decision, but it's the one that they made, and they went back to Germany. And at the very beginning, they worked in Hamburg, at some kind of a shipbuilding place where he designed air movements of different places on the ships. Then for the next letter, you can't read that, and I'm not going to either. But this is a gentleman that my father knew from the airships who was recommending. I think the job in Hamburg was probably a little bit less than he liked. Okay, it wasn't what he really liked to do. So this man is recommending that he turn himself over and go to Berlin and present himself to the German Luftwaffe and become an engineer for them. So in 37, you know where we're going with this. 37, they take a trip and move to Berlin. And then in 38, my sister's born. 41, I'm born. 42, my brother's born. So all of a sudden there are 5 children. And the war starts, of course, soon after this. The bombing in Berlin starts. This is a picture of a helicopter that my father worked. And there's a book over here that's called The Helicopters of the Third Reich. And there is a little story about my dad, and there's a picture of him with the helicopter afterwards, if you want to look at that or something. I was told you I was born in 41, which is the day actually in June 22nd that Germany invaded Russia. So times are going to be bad, and in Berlin was being bombed and people were disappearing, even though my parents didn't tell us what was happening. And of course I was young. Okay. So, you know, nobody understands anything when you're a child and you do what you're supposed to do. Right. In 1943, my father moved us. I think they said we took a train and we went to Hamburg. And this is the house that we lived in, not in Hamburg, I'm sorry, in Nordhausen. All right, thank you. Turn the page. I'm already on, I don't really need this, right? Anyway, in Nordhausen, and this home that you see here was apparently owned by my father's family since the 1890s. But his two sisters lived there and an aunt and another family, so it was still crowded. And there wasn't, there wasn't a whole lot to eat and things like that I remember. But on April 4th, 1945, Nordhausen is bombed at 9 o'clock in the morning. My older brother tells me that they had been in the basement many times, and but they were there this time, and the debris was coming in through the door, and pretty soon they could see the fires that were outside. So everyone said, we have to move, we have to leave. So my dad was not there. He was in Berlin working, right? My oldest brother and sister and the three younger ones and my mother walked what I think now might be maybe 3 miles. It was a hard walk. My parents had made a buggy that they put a piece of wood on the front of it so I could sit here and my brother could lie in the buggy. And, we tried to go, but the craters were so close together that the wheels of the buggy couldn't go around the craters, right? So it ended up that you had to pick us up and walk us down and pull the thing back up and keep going. We spent, I think, 1 night or 2 nights in what they call a Schwebergarten, which is lots of people have a little garden place someplace, and they build a little shack next to it, and then they can go there to take care of their garden. And so they found one of those, and that's where we spent 1 night. And then we went to Leimbach. My parents must have talked about this beforehand. There's no other way that they could have made all this work very well. Because when we got to Leimbach, my father got a convoy that was trying to get away from the Russians to take us with them. And the reason that they were excited to have my dad do that is because he lived in Nordhausen when he was a child, and he walked those mountains with his father. So he was able to tell the man how to drive without lights in the middle of the night and not be seen. And they took us to a place that's called Nienburg, just not that far, maybe, 15 miles maybe. And he dropped us off in this town. The town had a place where people put, they have a room here and they had a room there and a room there. And so the refugees would go, and we were assigned a room. My mother and the 3 younger children and the older brother and sister found some other place to live, somebody else that put up these guys were 14, 16, right? So, they didn't have to be in the same room with all of us all the time. And we were there for 72 days in 1 room with not much food to eat and not much fun that I can remember. And this is the place where I like to put this little bit of hindsight. I tell the story about one time when oldest sister was, her name is Annegret, and she was mopping the floor and there was a bucket on the floor. And my younger brother, whose name is Joe or Jochen, got into the bucket and he's got his feet hanging over the edge and he's stuck in there, right? And I think that sometimes that happens when you're in a crisis. You get stuck. You get stuck in a bucket and you do what you have to do in order to eat the next meal that you have. Even though you should be protesting or should be, doing other things, you have to try to feed yourself and keep going. So that's what they did. And on supposedly, 22nd of June, 1945, which, April 4th to June 22nd, my father has turned himself in or gave himself up or whatever to the British. And of course, his English is very helpful. So he's able to help the British forces with counting things or finding things or giving directions or helping them, whatever. Okay. And he is able to come and get us. He dropped us off a while ago, and so he knew where we were, kind of. He didn't know which room we were in. But my sister's looking out the window, and she hears him whistle. And I'm not able to whistle, but there was a famous whistle that the family used all the time so that you could tell if they were in the woods and my father would whistle, you'd know that was he. So she said, Buddy's here, he's going to get us. Buddy is what we call Dad, right? And Mutti was big by mother's name, Mutti. My mother during this time was not very well, as you can imagine, if you're a parent. Her hands were wrapped in gauze the whole time, okay? Because she had such eczema, all her hands. And I don't know if they had things that they really worked very well, but it was tar that they really put on there. And then she had migraines when she wasn't pregnant, so she had her head wrapped. And most of the time if I think back on being in this room, and I do have some pictures in my head, my mother is not really very present, okay? But that day, she said, when her daughter told her that her father was at the door or coming there, she said, "I will never worry again." So this is the bombing in Nordhausen, and I pretty much, whoops, I went too far. Pretty much, I mean, there isn't much to tell other than what you can imagine. And today you can see it on the screen every day, right? It's the same sort of demolition that's happening again in the world.
No, you just weren't speaking into the microphone for a minute, so now you are, and that's fine.
Okay, okay. So, again, my father has secured, I mean, he was kind of magic, right? Secured a Citroen from the people that he works with. And he comes there and we pile into the back of it. And there's a driver and a Citroen and a tank of gas, I understand, that he had with him. So we drive from, you want to go back to the map? It doesn't really matter. We drive from Nienburg to Kiel, which is in the northern part of Germany, on the Baltic, where my grandparents are. Where is Nick? Because it doesn't go to the top very well.
Sorry.
Can you see Kiel up in the top? You can't.
Yeah. To the left of the car.
Right, right.
Yellow pinions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we end up in Kiel, which is where my grandparents lived and where my grandfather was a carpenter. He had his carpentry was wrecked, totally destroyed during the bombing of Kiel, but they were still there. And an aunt lived there, and so we lived with them for 3 or 4, I don't know, days or a week, I don't know what it was. And then they found this heaven that we went to. They called it Waldfrieden, which is freedom in the woods. And we moved to Waldfrieden. Waldfrieden was owned by a friend of my grandparents and somebody that my mother knew too. He owned a porcelain store in the town of Kiel, and this was in the country, maybe 9 or 10 miles out of town. However, there were 5 families that lived in this house at this time, and we were in the basement. We did have quick access to the only restroom that was in the whole house. Okay, because it was on our floor. The people that were upstairs, they, used a pot, and so the halls were often not too nice. But there was a pond, there were woods, and I went to school. And the school was, I think that's me there. I also have a church story to tell there. When we would walk to church on Sundays, usually my mother and father didn't go to church, but I think my brother, who ended up the doctor, he plays the organ and he was interested in music, so he'd go to the church for the music, and we would all make a parade and walk past the pond and go to the church on Sundays. And being Ursula, I had some friends that were there, and I went to a different church. With these friends, they probably had more arts and crafts and more things to do that I like better. Okay, so I did that, but I didn't tell my parents, and I think my brothers and sisters didn't either. So it wasn't until this is patterned in this story of mine. It wasn't until at the end of the school year, they gave a prize for the perfect attendance, and I had to carry it home. My father was not working from about 47 until, because when the British was finished, then they would let him go, right? And the Germans could not rearm, they could not have any engineers working in the field or anything, so there wasn't much for him to do. And as I understand, his mental health was not the best that time. One time I heard that they put him in a Quonset hut. You know what a Quonset hut is? Like, okay, and it was filled with garden pots that were ceramic. And they said, if you knock the hole out of the bottom, it'll give you a penny apiece for every one that you do. And I think that lasted a week for him maybe, but that was pretty hard and didn't like it very well. And as I understand it, they reached out to those friends that they had. And I'm thinking about my friends that, you know, that are here from pickleball and choir and eating together and everybody. And they must have been nice people to have such good friends. Because here's the picture, this next picture is of all of us getting ready to come to America. And, you know, there is myself and my sister Marley. Okay. This is Marley. This is Anna Great, the oldest one. You can't hear me, but it's okay. This is Paul Helmut. He's now, let's see, he was born in 1930, so you can guess how old he is. He's still working, still driving his Tesla. A little sign on the back that says, I bought this before the madness. This is my brother Jochen, and he became a mechanical engineer. Annegret is the bookbinder, and there's an album over there, which several things that she bound that she does. She also makes scissor cuttings. And here we are, ready to come. Now, this is the next picture. We left Emsenhagen where we lived, and we went to Flensburg, which was the first trip. And family, you know, it was very sad. Everybody was crying, and it was hard for my mother because she was leaving her mother and her parents and all of that. And it was, I mean, must have been hard because people do things for you, and it's hard to be thankful and then not feel like you're doing everything, right? So they got into a car or something and came to meet us at the next stop. So this is the second stop on our trip before we go to Copenhagen. And, you know, the two down here, you know, they're a little bit not the best. And my mother's got tears in her eyes, but they brought her flowers. These are the older two. So we get on a boat that's called, in Copenhagen, we get on a boat that's called MS Batory. This is my passport picture. And this is the picture of the MSS Batory, and you can see that we are listed as passengers. Miss Ursula, Miss Maria, Marie-Louise, Helmut, Annegret, Marianne is my mother. My dad's picture name isn't on here, but it's just at a different place and not in this thing. We left from Copenhagen, and we were 11 days on the boat. And my mother was in glory. She didn't have to cook. I know she was sad, but she nevertheless was on the deck in a chair and relaxing. And my brother, my youngest brother, and I had the run of the whole ship. We loved it. There was somebody on the ship that lived there. You know, now we have people that live in retirement homes, and that cost like whatever it costs. Well, this man, that was his retirement home. He went back and forth on the boat, and that was where he lived. He sometimes drank a little too much, and we got that reputation. He got that reputation. So when my brother and I were going down the steps, if we'd see him come up the steps, we'd make sure we go all the way around. So we then run into him. This is all of us on the boat. Okay. This is in New York. You can see that New York is in the background, and this is my brother and sister who don't look too tough, do they? They look pretty well off. I think but they were very talented, and I think they were, 20 and 22 or something like that. And so this is exciting. We had to wait in New York an extra 4 hours because they were afraid that there was a bomb on the ship. So we had to wait a long time. When we did get off the boat, I'm not going to the next picture quite yet. When we got off the boat, one of the sponsors that helped to sponsor us was there, and he took us to a hotel, and we were able to wash up, so to speak. And before we got on the bus, and we drove from New York to Akron, Ohio. And we got to Akron, Ohio, and another sponsor came with 2 cars and picked us up, and we drove to this house, which is in Doylestown. I don't know if any of you have heard of Doylestown. Doylestown is, the problem with this house was that my mother wasn't in charge. My father went to work with Uncle Hans every day, and my mother was there with Tanta Ella. And Ella had no children, but she thought that she would tell us what to do. And I think that was pretty hard for my mother. We had to learn to keep our hands and say, excuse me, please. So, and besides, there were 5 of us, right? I mean, the older 2 didn't stay there, but the younger 3, and we slept on the floor where the people slept in the beds, right? It wasn't like there was extra space. There was 1 bathroom for all of us. It was a farm, so there were lots of nice things. I mean, there were, they had horses, and they had a couple cows, and they had chickens that we killed so they eat and so forth. Then we gathered eggs, and I don't know if they had much of a garden. I don't remember the garden there. Anyway, we were able to, this next one you can see. This is the sponsors that lived in the house in Doylestown. Her name is Ella. They were, of course, German people. And his name is Hans. And it turns out, you'll be interested to know that she used to live in Wadsworth and was Jim's nursery school teacher. So the next picture is of the next house that we lived in, which was in Wadsworth. And it was allowed us to live there because the lady that owned it was going to remodel it in 1929. And then the Depression came and she stopped. And from 1929 until 1950, she put everything she ever had, that every child Eddie made ever, didn't say that very well, but the house was filled with things from every paper that came from any school, every shirt that somebody had worn somewhere, sometime that was special. So it took a long time for my parents to clean it out and get the dump truck and to haul it to the place where they could get rid of it, which was, guess where? The farm that she lived on in the barn. So, and then they my dad put wallboard onto the 2x4s that were exposed, and fixed up the kitchen with my brothers, and he was handy, he could do anything, so they fixed it up. And so we moved there in November. So you came in August, so we have November, so it's 2 or 3 months. And for December, for Christmas, my father was able to find a big piece of wood that used to be used on the top of boxes, or instead of cardboard, they were just a real thin plywood that had strips all around it. Well, he made that into a door for the bathroom. And my sister, who was older, was able to have privacy. So this person we called Uncle Howard. He was one of the sponsors, and during between 1945 and 50, they would send us care packages. They lived in Connecticut, and he had known my father's sisters. So that's how Uncle Howard. This is a story that was in the newspapers in Wadsworth about this funny family coming from Germany. And my mother's baking cookies and so forth. Well, here's my hair story coming up. I have braids in this one picture, and a girlfriend and I that was in the school in Wadsworth decided to go to the restroom and take our hair out. Okay. And they took our picture. And after it was over, we went back to the bathroom and I braided hers. And she braided mine, and I went home, right? Nothing was said. Until the picture came. And my mother, she said, "You have time at school to play with your hair?" She got the scissors and she took the braid and she cut it.
Oh.
When I tell that to my fourth graders, for example, you know, I said there was no yelling, there was no shouting, there was no spanking. It's just hair. It will grow again. You'll learn your lesson, right? So, you know, you had to get used to that in Germany, or it being a German family. If you asked what was for dinner, the answer was what you find on the table. If you asked what should I wear tomorrow, the answer was what you have on today. And part of that was because there wasn't much, but part of it was because you didn't need to change your clothes every day like we do now, right? You didn't have a washer and dryer to put them in and to wash them for the next day. And you didn't have 6 pairs of trousers or 8, I don't know how many t-shirts I have. It's embarrassing. Then the other thing that happened in my family that was kind of different generations, but my mother at 46 had child number 6. My mother was 46, my father was 51. They had come to America. People had given us everything, couches and sheets and clothing and places to sleep. And here they had another child, right? My parents slept on the sofa in the living room of the house in Doylestown that I talked about. So I don't think it was something that they wished had happened. And they were worried that she might not be healthy and all those kinds of things. But she is. She's great. And there she is. Her name is Barbara. The oldest is named Paul Helmut. The next one is, no, Annegret is the older one. The next one's Paul Helmut. Next one is Marie-Louise. Then comes Ursula. Then comes Johann. Then comes Barbara. And in 1954, my sister is married to a person. It's another funny sort of story. His name is Gary. He spent 9 months in prison during the war because he was a conscientious objector. And his name is Gordon, and he married my sister, and he was from Akron. And in Akron, there's Firestone and other people that owned islands in Michigan. And so his family owned and still owns an island at the Lachino Islands, which is across the Mackinac Bridge, not very far from there, half an hour. And we are in this next picture, all on the ferry going, because it was before the bridge was built, going across to visit my sister's family and then go to the island, which for my parents, I think was the best thing they'd ever been able to do. They had 2 weeks of vacation, you know, they were scheduled and they didn't do anything except cook and clean and stuff like that during that time, but it was really wonderful. I remember I did a lot of work up there. I didn't like it that well. And I didn't like the isolation because there was, you know, at that time, no radio. And well, I did get a radio at one time, but anyway, it's still part of the family. They still love to go. And the island has this wonderful place where you can go. This is another story of my stupidness. I was in a reading contest. And I was able to walk to the library by myself. And I went to the library and I read and sat in the corner and read and read and read and read, because I thought maybe if I got the prize, I might get a bicycle. Well, I did win a prize, but I got a book. I think it's something to think about when you're thinking about what do we give presents to kids that do things, right? I mean, it might seem obvious that, well, if they love to read, then give them another book, okay? But it may have a totally different reason for them to be doing the reading. And now we're at, well, let's see, Barbara's, we're almost to the end of my presentation because this next picture is the family that Jim and I have. There are 3 children. 2 of them are here tonight. 1 is no longer with us. And then we have a great granddaughter now. Her name is Lucia. And then is happily ever after for the next 60 years. We were married in 61, 3 children, 4 grandchildren, 1 great grandchild, 22 kitchens, because we have moved a lot, Jim and I, okay? I think probably it was not as easy on the kids as well, you can tell that I'm kind of obnoxious, so moving was easy, right? I just made new friends wherever I went, like you guys have been, right? 3 years and you're all here, right? Pretty great. Now I try to protest in my own way because I think all of these things are hard to put into place. It's hard to know what to do. So one of the protests is a thing I put into the art about the immigrants. And so those dolls that I made over there are different shapes and colors and sizes. And the doll in the front top here was weaving I did. And she says, a woman's place is in the house, the White House.
Good job.
Should we do questions? Do we have time or is it,
Yeah, if that's okay.
if there are any questions?
I'd be happy to. Yes. How did you get how did your father get the sponsors?
Like I said, I think that they were friends of theirs that they had when they were in America, and that the German friends from the 24 people that came in the 30s to be and you know at the Goodyear craft. So it was Mr. Bauch and Mr. Shuttle and Howard, and then
He knew them.
oh yeah, they knew all of them, right? Very well, in fact, right. One of the people that helped to pay for us was a man that my father had gone to engineering school with. So they were friends for, 80 years or something. And when we talked about cookies and strudel and so forth, then they were talking, well, what do you like? And I said, well, cookies weren't a part of my life growing up because there wasn't much. Then there wasn't sugar and we didn't have cookies. We had Stollen at Christmas. And it's something else that Christmas was pretty important in a Christian way, but also in a secular way, in that we sang a lot, okay? And that was part of learning about Christmas. So Advent would come and there's an Advent wreath, and we would gather around on Sunday night and we would learn the songs, right? Sing them every Sunday night and learn what to say. I think we had to practice once, so we had to say something in front of St. Nicholas that came, so. Yes.
Did you have to stay in front of the Russians while trying to leave Germany at all?
Yes, although that was why we wanted to get on the right side of the Elbe and why my father moved us from Leinbach, from Nordhausen to Leinbach, because that was the right place to be.
Away from the Russians.
Yeah.
Ursula, where did you get food when you were in the house and you said your mother wasn't particularly present? And she has these children.
There were different stories that came through the time. One was that she found a 50-pound sack of peas, and we had peas for breakfast and for lunch and for supper, which is true. My sister doesn't eat them to this day. Jim teases me. He says, well, you're gonna tell him about the rutabagas that lasted for 6 weeks? We did eat rutabagas because they were available, but yes,
Have you ever gone back to Germany to visit the places you grew up?
yes. The house in Worthington, is still there, and it's now a home for people that have difficulties or disabled. And, there's a bus stop close to, so they can get on the bus from where they live, and there are handicrafts taught there and so forth. It's not owned by people anymore, it's owned by an organization. But we went to the basement, my brother and I, and, you know, where we used to play ball on the wall. Yes.
In 45, when you were here, we came back to turn 45 and 50. How were you accepted by population in general?
Well, I was trying to keep it to half an hour, okay? But I remember very early in Wadsworth, there was a boy that was walking next to me home, and he said, I have X-ray eyes. I can see you're a Nazi. So I think, you know, there was some of that. And it was probably the reason that I don't know much history of, you know, of the war, because they didn't talk about it in my home. And at the very beginning, we sat around the table for meals and we were supposed to speak English. And if we didn't speak English, we were supposed to put a penny in. Nobody had pennies, of course, but put a penny in the pot. And that lasted, I don't know, 3 weeks. And so then after that, we were supposed to speak German and put a penny in the pot if you didn't speak German, right? So that we would keep it. I think it helped. I think it helped to have the time when we spoke German at home, right? Well, at least you didn't pay for this. So.
Thank you so much, Ursula. That was wonderful and fascinating. And I encourage you to continue to talk to Ursula, ask questions. I'd like to close in prayer. Then there's plenty more food, and you're still welcome to come and look at these things. But also parents should get their children in about 2 minutes. Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for Ursula, and we thank you, oh God, for refugees and immigrants and sponsors and welcome and kindness and compassion. We pray that you would help us to love the stranger, to love the immigrant and the refugee, to be your welcoming people. Continue to bless and use Ursula and her family, and continue, oh God, to bless and use us. In Jesus' name we ask it. And all God's people say, amen. Amen. God bless you.
No, but I want to boss. I grew up in Akron. I had all the places to talk about very, very well. Yes. My grandfather was an engineer. How are you doing? He was already on the beach. There are airship. And many airships. And what's your neighbor?
Yeah, I purposely, I wasn't going to wait. All I wanted to go back and go.
Over the gas. And, no, I go all the way down.
I'm the guy with a pointer, with a laser pointer.
Yeah. My job setting up.
What a great program. Good. Sure is. And you can understand why the kids like it. Oh, absolutely. No little sign that says it.